11:47 p.m. The penthouse kitchen should have been empty. Declan Wright pushed open the door, toolbox in hand, expecting marble counters and a dripping faucet. Instead, he found his boss on the floor. Victoria Ashford, the CEO who never smiled, who ended careers with a single glance, who terrified entire boardrooms, sat crumpled against the cabinet in silk pajamas, arms locked around her knees, shoulders shaking in the half-light of a December night so cold that frost crept across the windows like fingers reaching for warmth that would never come. A single candle burned on a birthday cake meant for no one. Behind her, a photograph clung to the wall, a little girl with dark curls and a smile that looked hauntingly familiar, frozen forever at 4 years old, holding a rainbow pinwheel that would never spin again. Victoria's head jerked up. Mascara streaked down her porcelain face like war paint dissolving in defeat. Their eyes locked across the impossible distance between wealth and work, between grief hidden and grief witnessed. His toolbox hit the floor, metal clanging against tile, shattering the sacred silence of a mother mourning alone. She didn't scream, didn't order him out. Her voice came out broken, barely above a whisper, and the words sliced through him like glass. Please, forget what you saw here. But Declan couldn't forget. Not the rawness in her eyes, not the child's worn bracelet peeking from beneath her sleeve, and certainly not the truth that this moment would crack open, that the most powerful woman he'd ever known was carrying a grief so heavy it had been slowly killing her. And since 4 years earlier, Methodist Dallas Hospital had smelled like disinfectant and dying flowers. Declan Wright, 31 years old and about to become a widower, sat beside a bed where his wife had shrunk to almost nothing. Grace weighed 43 pounds at the end. Her blonde hair, once thick enough to braid, had fallen out in clumps during the 3rd round of chemo. But her eyes, those green eyes that had looked at him across a community college library 7 years ago and changed everything, still held light. Harper, 2 years old and too young to understand that mommy wouldn't be coming home, slept on the vinyl couch clutching the pink stuffed rabbit Grace had sewn during her last good month. Grace's hand in his felt like bird bones wrapped in paper. You have to promise me something. Declan couldn't speak. If he opened his mouth, the dam would break, and he needed to be strong for her. Strong for Harper. Strong because that's what men did when the world was ending. Declan. Her voice carried that gentle firmness she used when he was being stubborn. Look at me. He looked. Tears fell anyway, hot and shameful, down his face. You're going to raise our daughter to be strong and kind and brave. You're going to teach her that love matters more than money, that character matters more than credentials, that being a good person is the only success that counts. He nodded, throat too tight for words. And you're going to promise me one more thing, the hardest thing. She squeezed his hand, with what little strength remained. You won't lock yourself away. When the right person comes along, someone who sees you, really sees you, Declan, you'll open your heart again. Harper needs to see her father happy, not just surviving. How can I love anyone else when my heart only belongs to you? The words came out strangled, desperate. Grace smiled, that sad, knowing smile. Hearts are bigger than we think. They can hold more than one love, each person in a different way. You'll understand when the time comes. The machines beeped, their steady rhythm counting down the hours neither of them wanted to acknowledge. Promise me. Promise you'll live, not just exist. I promise. He kissed her hand, her forehead, her lips one last time. I promise, Grace. She died 3 days later at 4:17 a.m. while Declan held her hand, and Harper slept in the chair beside them, too young to know that when she woke up the world would be different forever. Now 4 years later, Declan's world had found its rhythm in the small certainties of single fatherhood. Every morning at 5:45, his alarm shattered the Dallas winter darkness. The apartment in Oak Cliff wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, aging appliances, carpet that had seen better decades, but it was clean and safe and filled with Harper's artwork taped to every available surface. He moved through the morning routine with practiced efficiency. Coffee first, black and strong enough to wake the dead. Then Harper's lunchbox peanut butter and strawberry jam on whole wheat baby carrots in a Ziploc bag. Red grapes with no seeds, star-shaped cookies he'd baked Sunday afternoon while Harper colored at the kitchen table. And the note always a note on yellow paper. Daddy loves you to the moon and back, with a hand-drawn heart that never came out quite right, but Harper kept every single one in a shoebox under her bed. At 6:15 he opened her bedroom door. The walls were covered in rainbows, crayon rainbows, marker rainbows, watercolor rainbows in every shade Harper could find. She'd been obsessed with them since she was 3, claimed they were bridges between earth and heaven, where Mommy Grace could walk down to check on them. Princess, time to wake up, sweetheart. Harper burrowed deeper into her unicorn comforter. 5 more minutes, Daddy. I already gave you 5 minutes. He sat on the edge of her bed, gently shaking her shoulder. If you don't get up, you know what happens. Her eyes popped open, suddenly alert. Daddy, no, not the tickle monster, so too late. He attacked fingers, finding all her ticklish spots while Harper shrieked with laughter, squirming away. These moments, these ordinary, beautiful moments of being her father made every sleepless night worth it. Every worry about making rent, every meal of ramen noodles after Harper went to bed so she could have the good food, every sacrifice, large and small, faded into insignificance when she laughed like this, when she was happy and safe and loved. By 6:45, they stood in the bathroom while Declan attempted to tame her wild auburn curls into 2 braids. His technique had improved over 4 years, but Grace had possessed some innate talent for hair that Declan simply lacked. The braids came out crooked, uneven, slightly lopsided. Harper examined his work in the mirror. Daddy, my hair is crooked again. Declan sighed. I'm trying, baby. Daddy's not as good as Mommy was. She spun around and wrapped her arms around his waist. But you're the best daddy in the whole world. He knelt down, pulling her close, breathing in the strawberry shampoo scent of her hair. These were the moments when Grace felt closest, when Harper's kindness and love shone through so clearly that Declan could see his wife's influence, her legacy living on in their daughter. In the truck on the way to Jefferson Elementary, Harper clutched her latest masterpiece, a rainbow painted in brilliant acrylics arcing across construction paper with all the confidence of a 6-year-old artist who believed in magic. Can I show this to my class today? Declan glanced over while navigating the morning traffic. What did you draw, honey? A rainbow for Mommy Grace in heaven. Mrs. Patterson said rainbows connect earth and sky so Mommy can see us from up there. His throat tightened. That's beautiful, Harper. Mommy would be so proud of you. Harper's expression turned serious the way it did when she was thinking about big questions. Daddy, do you think Mommy is lonely in heaven? He pulled into the school parking lot, put the truck in park, and turned to face her fully. This was important. This mattered. I don't think so, baby. I think she's watching over us every day, and she's happy because you're such a good, kind girl. And because you're a good daddy. I try my best. Then she's very, very happy. Harper's smile could light up the darkest room. He walked her to the classroom, watching her run ahead with her rainbow clutched proudly in both hands. April Patterson. Harper's teacher stood by the door, 32, brown hair pulled back, genuinely kind in a way that made Declan grateful his daughter spent her days here. Mr. Wright, Harper is doing wonderfully. She's reading above grade level and her emotional intelligence is remarkable. You're doing an amazing job. Declan shifted uncomfortably. He'd never liked being the center of attention, never wanted praise for simply being a father. Thank you. I'm just doing what any parent would do. Not every parent could do it alone. She smiled warmly. You should be proud. He nodded, mumbled another thanks, and headed back to his truck. Pride wasn't what he felt. Exhaustion, worry, constant low-grade fear that he was somehow failing. Harper. Those were his constant companions. But pride that felt too much like patting himself on the back when he was just surviving, just putting one foot in front of the other because stopping wasn't an option when you had a 6-year-old daughter counting on you. Ashford Technologies occupied a 45-story glass tower in downtown Dallas, all sharp angles and reflective surfaces that made it look like a shard of ice thrust up from the earth. Declan's Ford F-150 12-years-old dented bumper check engine light that came and went looked out of place among the BMWs and Teslas in the executive parking garage. He parked in the maintenance section, pulled on his Navy work uniform, D. Wright, Electrical Services, embroidered over the pocket, and hefted his toolbox. 18 pounds of equipment, everything from wire strippers to voltage testers, all organized with the precision of a man who took pride in his craft. The box itself was older than his marriage, a gift from his father Patrick before the heart attack that killed him at 53, engraved on the side. "A man's worth is in his work, Dad." Frank Donnelly met him at the service entrance. 55, gray hair, calloused hands, and the kind of supervisor who'd worked his way up from apprentice and never forgot where he came from. "Declan, morning. Need you on floors 15 through 22 today. Reports of flickering lights, might be loose wiring in the junction boxes." "Yes, sir, I'll handle it." Frank clapped a hand on his shoulder. 3 years, Dec. 0 complaints. You show up, you do the work right, you don't create drama. That's worth more than any college degree in my book. Declan just nodded. He'd gone straight into apprenticeship after high school while his classmates headed to university. No shame in it, his father had taught him that skilled trades were honorable work, that a man who could fix what was broken would never go hungry. But in a building full of MBAs and tech degrees, he felt the gap, the invisible line between people who wore suits and people who wore tool belts. Inside the building hummed with the quiet efficiency of corporate success. Employees streamed through the marble lobby in expensive clothes, clutching coffee cups that cost more than Declan's lunch, talking about metrics and synergies and market disruptions in languages he'd never learned. They didn't see him. To them, he was furniture, useful when something broke, invisible the rest of the time. He preferred it that way. Being noticed meant questions, small talk, the inevitable moment when someone asked what he did and their eyes glazed over with polite disinterest. Better to be the ghost who kept the lights on. But passing the 42nd floor executive territory, he couldn't help overhearing the voices from the conference room. The door stood partially open, and Victoria Ashford's voice carried like a knife through butter, cold and precise, and utterly without mercy. "I don't accept almost perfect. Either it's flawless or you're fired." "Do I make myself clear?" A man's voice, older, wavering. "Yes, Ms. Ashford, I understand." "You have until end of day. Don't disappoint me again." Footsteps. A man in his 40s emerged, face pale, carrying a cardboard box of personal belongings. The third executive terminated in 6 months. He walked past Declan without seeing him, eyes focused on some middle distance where his career used to be. Marge Collins. Victoria's assistant whispered to a nearby colleague. "Another one bites the dust. That woman doesn't forgive mistakes." Declan moved on, climbing the service stairs to begin his rounds. He'd seen Victoria Ashford from a distance maybe a dozen times in 3 years. Always in motion, always surrounded by a force field of assistance and urgency. Always wearing that expression of absolute control. She was beautiful in the way expensive art was beautiful, perfect and untouchable and somehow cold. Forbes had called her a visionary. Texas Monthly had run a cover story titled, "The CEO Who Never Blinks." At 31, she'd taken her father's software company and transformed it into an AI powerhouse, worth $800 million. She also apparently fired people without hesitation and worked such brutal hours that the lights in her office never seemed to go off. Declan had been called to replace bulbs up there at 3 in the morning, once Victoria still at her desk. Eyes locked on multiple screens, coffee cup surrounded by its identical predecessors like tombstones marking the night's passage. He wondered sometimes if there was a person under that polished exterior. If Victoria Ashford ever laughed or cried or felt anything other than the cold satisfaction of quarterly earnings exceeding projections. But mostly he didn't think about her at all. She existed in a different universe, one where wealth and power insulated you from the daily struggles of choosing between fixing the truck or buying Harper new shoes. The day passed in the comfortable rhythm of skilled work. Declan found the loose connections on floor 18, replaced faulty breakers on 20, and rewired a junction box on 15 that had been installed wrong by whoever handled it last. His hands moved with the confidence of 10,000 hours of practice testing voltages, stripping wires, making connections that would hold because he took pride in doing things right the first time. At 3:30, his phone buzzed. Jefferson Elementary. "Mr. Wright, this is Mrs. Patterson. Harper had a small accident on the playground. She's fine, just scraped her knees and got a bit shaken up. She's asking for you." His heart did that thing it always did when the school called, that split second of panic before logic kicked in. "I'll be right there." He found Frank got permission to leave early and headed for the parking garage. The elevator stopped on 42. The doors opened. Victoria Ashford stood there, tablet in hand, tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Declan's monthly rent, every hair in place, every surface polished to inhuman perfection. For a moment she stared at the elevator panel, and Declan thought she'd wait for the next one. Executives didn't share elevators with maintenance workers. But she stepped inside. The doors closed. 30 seconds of descending floors stretched into an eternity of awkward stunts. She smelled expensive, something subtle and complex that probably had a French name. Her heels clicked softly against the floor whenever the elevator shifted. She didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge his existence, which was fine because he had nothing to say to her anyway. His phone buzzed again. A photo from Mrs. Patterson Harper sitting on the nurse's bench, knees scraped and bloody, tears streaking her face, clutching her rainbow painting like a lifeline. She looked so small, so hurt, and Declan's chest constricted with that primal fear every parent knows, the helplessness of not being there when your child needs you. "Is everything all right?" Victoria's voice startled him, softer than he'd ever heard it in the building. He looked up, found her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, not cold anymore. Something else flickered beneath the surface. "My daughter fell at school, nothing serious, but she's upset." He showed her the photo before his brain caught up to his instincts. Victoria went completely still, her eyes fixed on Harper's face with an intensity that made Declan uncomfortable. Like she was memorizing every detail, the auburn curls escaping from crooked braids, the gap-toothed smile trying to be brave, the rainbow clutched in small hands streaked with playground dirt. Her hand moved to her wrist, hidden beneath her suit sleeve, fingers finding something there. Once, twice. When she finally spoke, her voice had gone quiet, almost fragile. "How old is she?" The question felt weighted, important in ways Declan didn't understand. 6. Just turned 6 in September. Something flickered across Victoria's face there, and gone so fast he almost missed it. Pain raw and immediate, like someone had pressed on a wound that never healed. Her breath hitched just once before the mask slammed back into place. The elevator dinged. Lobby. Victoria straightened, and just like that, she was untouchable again, perfectly controlled. "I hope she feels better soon." She walked away without looking back, heels clicking across marble, leaving Declan standing in the elevator with the unsettling feeling that he'd just witnessed something important, though he couldn't explain what. Harper threw herself into his arms when he reached the nurse's office, sobbing into his shoulder while he held her and murmured reassurances. The scrapes weren't bad, kids heal fast at 6, but she'd been scared and wanted her daddy, and that was enough. That was everything. "I saved my rainbow, Daddy. I didn't let it get ruined." He looked at the crumpled painting, now smeared with dirt and blood, but still clearly a rainbow, still beautiful because Harper had made it with love. "You did great, Princess. Mommy Grace would be so proud." On the drive home, Harper chattered about the playground and her friend Emma, who'd helped her to the nurse, and how Mrs. Patterson had given her a special Band-Aid with stars on it. But Declan's mind kept drifting back to that moment in the elevator, to the way Victoria Ashford's face had changed when she looked at Harper's photo, to whatever she'd found on her wrist that seemed to anchor her when emotions threatened to break through. For 3 years, Victoria had been a distant figure, more concept than person. But for 30 seconds in an elevator, she'd been human, vulnerable, and that glimpse behind the armor unsettled him more than her reputation ever had. Over the next 2 weeks, Declan found himself noticing things he'd previously ignored. Small details that painted a picture he hadn't wanted to see. Victoria arrived at the building before dawn, 6:10 a.m., when Declan showed up early to finish a project. She emerged from a black Mercedes sedan, always alone, always carrying multiple bags, like she'd spent the night somewhere but not at home. Shadows under expertly applied makeup, shoulders slightly hunched as if carrying invisible weight. She ate lunch at her desk. Declan knew because he'd been called to fix an outlet in the adjacent conference room at 2:15 p.m. on Tuesday. And through the glass wall, he watched her sit motionless in front of a sandwich, staring at her computer screen without taking a single bite for 10 full minutes before finally throwing the whole thing in the trash. On Wednesday afternoon, he replaced ceiling tiles on the 3rd floor near the company daycare center. The facility stayed open late for employees working overtime, a perk Ashford Technologies advertised in recruitment materials. Through the observation window, Declan watched a dozen kids playing, laughing, building block towers and coloring pictures. Victoria Ashford stopped outside that window, stood there for 7 minutes while Declan pretended to work on a perfectly functional light fixture. She didn't move, didn't blink, just watched the children with an expression that made something in Declan's chest hurt. Her hand crept to her wrist beneath the sleeve of her ivory blouse, fingers moving in that same pattern he'd seen in the elevator. Over and over. Her eyes glistened. Then a little girl inside, maybe 4 years old, dark hair and pigtails, laughed at something another child said, a sound so pure and joyful that it seemed to echo in the hallway. Victoria flinched like she'd been slapped, turned and walked away so fast it was almost running, one hand pressed to her mouth. Declan stood on his ladder, forgotten and invisible, and wondered what could hurt someone that badly. Thursday brought another glimpse behind the curtain. A boy, maybe 4, came tearing down the executive floor hallway, chasing a soccer ball that had escaped from the daycare. The ball ricocheted off walls, bounced past Victoria's office, and scattered a dozen toy cars from the boy's backpack across the polished floor. Victoria emerged from her office as the boy dropped to his knees, frantically gathering his treasures with the desperate urgency of a child who knows he's in trouble. Declan watched from the service alcove, expecting her to summon security or at minimum deliver a withering look that would send the kid fleeing. Instead, she knelt down, moved slowly, carefully, gathering toy cars with gentle hands. She picked up a red convertible, examined it with something like wonder, then held it out to the boy. "This one's my favorite. The fast ones always are." The boy, maybe 5 now that Declan could see him clearly, grinned. "Mine too, it goes super fast. I bet it does." Victoria's smile, a real smile, soft and genuine, transformed her face completely. For that moment, she wasn't the ruthless CEO. She was just a woman talking to a child about toy cars. The boy grabbed his collection and ran off. Victoria remained kneeling on the floor, staring at her empty hands like she'd forgotten what they were for. Her chest rose and fell with breaths that looked difficult, painful. When she finally stood, she pressed her palm flat against the wall for support, eyes closed, lips moving in what might have been counting or prayer. Declan had seen that look before. In his bathroom mirror late at night when the loneliness became too heavy to carry alone. It was the look of someone drowning in memories. Friday evening, Declan worked late, replacing an entire breaker panel on floor 28. At 9:00 p.m., he carried his equipment down to the parking garage through the service stairs. Most of the cars had gone home hours ago. The garage echoed with emptiness, except for Victoria's black Mercedes parked in its reserved spot near the executive elevator, and Victoria herself sitting motionless behind the wheel. Declan hesitated in the doorway. She hadn't started the engine, hadn't moved, just sat with her forehead resting against the steering wheel, shoulders shaking in a way that suggested tears she couldn't afford to shed anywhere someone might see. He understood that impulse. He'd done the same thing countless times in the months after Grace died, sitting in his truck after Harper was asleep, letting himself break where no one could witness the weakness, the failure, the crushing weight of grief that never actually got lighter, you just got stronger at carrying it. He left through a different exit, giving her privacy. But that image stayed with him, the most powerful woman in Dallas, alone in an empty garage, unable to make herself drive to whatever waited at home. Or more likely, unable to face what didn't wait there anymore. The call came at 11:15 p.m. on a Thursday night while Declan helped Harper finish a math worksheet. She struggled with word problems, got frustrated when numbers didn't behave the way she wanted. But he'd learned patience was worth more than getting the right answer quickly. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. "Mr. Wright, this is Donald Walsh, building manager at Ashford Technologies. We have an emergency situation, major water leak in the executive penthouse. Ms. Ashford specifically requested our best technician. Can you come immediately?" Declan glanced at Harper now, yawning over her paper. Nearly midnight. Can't it wait until morning? Ms. Ashford was very clear. She wants this handled tonight. I know it's late, but... Walsh's voice carried the tension of a man caught between impossible demands. Declan thought about his bank account, the overtime pay, the new winter coat Harper needed. "Give me 30 minutes. He tucked Harper into bed, read her 3 pages of her current favorite book about a girl who could talk to animals, and kissed her forehead. Then he knocked on Mrs. Brennan's door. Margaret Brennan, Maggie, to everyone who knew her, was 62, widowed 5 years, and had adopted Declan and Harper as the family she'd lost. She opened the door in a bathrobe, hair in curlers, but her expression held only concern. "What's wrong, dear?" "Emergency call at work. I'll be back before 2. "Go on then. Harper will be fine. I'll check on her every half hour." "Thank you, Maggie. I don't know what we'd do without you." She patted his cheek. "You'd manage. You always do." The drive to downtown Dallas took 22 minutes through empty streets. December cold had settled over the city, frost creeping across windshield, streetlights haloed in frozen air. The radio played some country ballad about lost love and second chances, and Declan changed the station because he wasn't in the mood for sentiment. Ashford Technologies loomed dark except for scattered office lights where workaholics burned midnight oil. Walsh met him at the service entrance with a keycard. 42nd floor executive penthouse. Ms. Ashford's private residence. You'll need this for the elevator." He handed over the card, then fixed Declan with a serious look. "Right, listen carefully. Fix the leak. Don't touch anything else. Ms. Ashford values her privacy extremely highly. In and out, understand?" "Understood." The elevator required the special card just to access the button for 42. Declan rode up a lone toolbox heavy in his hand, wondering what kind of emergency couldn't wait until business hours. Probably something that would have cost thousands in water damage if left overnight. Rich people thought differently about money and time. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse. The doors slid apart and Declan stepped into a space that looked nothing like a home. White. Everything white. Walls, furniture, floors, all pristine and perfect and completely sterile. A showcase apartment from an architecture magazine, beautiful in the way museums are beautiful, impressive and utterly lifeless. Leather sofa positioned at precise angles. Glass coffee table without a single fingerprint. Abstract art on walls, expensive but emotionless. Not a photograph anywhere. Not a book left open, not a jacket draped over a chair, not a single sign that an actual human being lived here. Declan had grown up in houses where clutter meant life. His father's tools scattered on workbenches, his mother's knitting projects abandoned mid-row, evidence of people who actually inhabited space instead of just passing through. This penthouse felt like a mausoleum, beautiful and dead. The silence pressed against his eardrums. No television murmur, no music, no sounds of life. Just the faint drip of water somewhere in the depths of the apartment. He found the kitchen industrial-grade appliances marble counters. Everything spotless, and identified 2 doors. The left had a small utility closet symbol. The right had nothing. The dripping came from the right. He opened that door. Victoria Ashford sat on the kitchen floor, knees drawn to chest, arms wrapped around her shins like she was trying to hold herself together through sheer force of will. She wore silk pajamas, ivory-colored, expensive even in sleepwear. Her dark hair hung loose past her shoulders instead of pulled back in the severe bun she wore to the office. Mascara tracked down her face in twin rivers of black. On the counter above her, a birthday cake. Chocolate frosting, elaborate decorative work, a single candle burned down to a nub of wax. Pink script across the top. Happy birthday, Olivia, 9 years old. On the wall, a photograph in a silver frame, a little girl maybe 4 years old with dark curls and gray-green eyes, and a smile that could light up the world. She wore a yellow dress and held a rainbow pinwheel frozen in a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. Below the photo, a small engraved plaque, Olivia Marie Ashford, 2016-2020, forever in Mommy's heart. Victoria wore a bracelet on her wrist, small, clearly made for a child, silver with engraving Declan couldn't read from where he stood. Her fingers found it unconsciously, a gesture of connection to something precious and lost. Declan stood paralyzed. His toolbox slipped from numb fingers and hit the tile floor with a crash that echoed like a gunshot in the quiet apartment. Victoria's head snapped up. Their eyes met. He saw everything in that instant, the raw grief, the crushing loneliness, the weight of a loss so profound it had hollowed her out from the inside. This wasn't the ruthless executive. This was a mother drowning in sorrow she couldn't escape, trapped in a penthouse prison of her own making. Marking her dead daughter's birthday with a cake no one would eat, and a candle no one would blow out. She scrambled to her feet, some instinct toward dignity trying to resurrect itself. Her hands moved to wipe her face, to smooth her hair, to rebuild the fortress. But her fingers trembled. Her breath came in ragged gasps. The mask wouldn't fit back on. "I'm sorry, I thought this was the building," manager said. Declan couldn't finish a sentence, couldn't find words that made sense when he'd just witnessed something he had no right to see. Victoria held up one hand, cutting him off. When she spoke, her voice carried that CEO authority, cold and commanding, but it shook underneath. "The leak is in the other room, through that door. Fix it and leave." She turned away from him, spine rigid, and began gathering up the birthday cake with hands that betrayed her despite her best efforts. She was trying to erase the evidence, to pretend this moment hadn't happened, to go back to being untouchable. Declan wanted to say something, anything, to acknowledge what he'd witnessed, to tell her he understood because he'd been there himself, marking birthdays for someone who would never grow older. But words felt inadequate, intrusive. Sometimes the kindest thing you could do was pretend you hadn't seen someone shatter. He picked up his toolbox and walked to the correct door. Spent the next 45 minutes replacing a corroded copper pipe while the image of Victoria Ashford crying on her kitchen floor burned itself into his memory. When he finished, she was gone. The cake was gone. The photograph remained, but someone had turned it to face the wall, as if even looking at her daughter's smile was a wound too deep to bear. Declan left his work order on the counter with the usual information: date, time, issue, resolution, signature. He stared at the form for a long moment, pen in hand, then added a line at the bottom in small print. P.S. Sometimes broken things can be fixed. Sometimes we just need someone patient enough to try. D.W. He left it there, uncertain if it would help or hurt, knowing only that leaving her completely alone felt wrong in a way his gut recognized even if his brain couldn't articulate. The drive home took him through empty Dallas streets at 1:30 a.m. Snow had started falling, rare for Texas, beautiful and cold. His phone buzzed with a text from Maggie. "Harper's still sleeping like an angel. Take your time." But Declan couldn't stop thinking about the woman he'd left behind in that white mausoleum, about the photograph of a little girl who loved rainbows, who'd never make it to 9 years old, who'd left a hole in her mother's heart so big that 5 years hadn't even begun to fill it. He thought about Harper asleep in her room, alive and whole, and his reason for breathing. He thought about Grace, gone 4 years, but still present in every decision he made, every lesson he taught their daughter. He thought about how grief didn't discriminate, it found everyone regardless of wealth or status and demanded its toll. When he got home at 1:47 a.m., he checked on Harper, still asleep, clutching her stuffed rabbit, peaceful and safe. He stood in her doorway for 5 minutes, just watching her breathe, feeling grateful and terrified in equal measure, because loving someone this much meant living in constant fear of loss. That night, he didn't sleep, lay in bed staring at ceiling tiles, listening to the apartment settle, wondering if Victoria Ashford was doing the same thing 20 floors above the city, alone, with her ghosts and her birthday cake meant for a little girl who would never grow old. Morning came too early. Declan arrived at Ashford Technologies at 7:30, running on 3 hours of sleep and too much coffee. The building looked the same, glass and steel, indifferent to human drama. But something fundamental had shifted. He knew Victoria Ashford's secret now carried the weight of her grief like contraband he hadn't asked for. The service elevator stopped on 42. The doors opened and Victoria stood there in a charcoal suit, hair pulled back with geometric precision, sunglasses hiding her eyes despite being indoors. She'd rebuilt the armor overnight, every piece locked into place. For 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours, neither moved. The elevator waited, neutral territory between their worlds. Declan found his voice first. "Good morning." Victoria stepped in without acknowledging him, stood as far from him as the small space allowed, spine rigid, breathing carefully controlled. But her hand crept to her wrist beneath the suit sleeve fingers, finding that bracelet in a gesture that seemed unconscious. The elevator descended in silence. She smelled like expensive perfume, struggling to mask exhaustion. Her reflection in the polished doors showed shadows no makeup could completely hide. At the lobby, she walked out without a word, heels clicking sharp and final across marble. But Declan had seen her shoulders tense when he spoke, had watched her grip tighten on the leather portfolio she carried. She wasn't unaffected. She was just better at hiding it than most people. Marge Collins cornered him an hour later while he tested outlets on floor 30. "Did you do something to upset Ms. Ashford?" "She's been impossible all morning, canceled 3 meetings, won't see anyone," practically bit Jonathan's head off when he asked about quarterly projections. "I just fixed a leak, that's all." "Well, something's wrong. Woman's wound tighter than a spring." Marge shook her head and moved on, leaving Declan with a screwdriver and guilt he couldn't quite justify. He'd done nothing wrong. Witnessed something private, yes, but he hadn't asked for that. Hadn't gossiped about it, hadn't even told Maggie when she'd asked why he looked so tired this morning. Victoria Ashford's pain was her own, and Declan understood the sanctity of that privacy. Still, he couldn't shake the image. The CEO on the floor, the birthday cake. The photograph turned to face the wall, as if even looking at her daughter's smile was a wound too deep to bear. That afternoon, picking up Harper from school, he found himself watching the other parents with their children. Mothers who took for granted they'd have tomorrow, fathers who didn't realize how fragile the whole structure was. How fast everything you loved could disappear, leaving you hollow and broken and marking birthdays for ghosts. Harper ran out clutching another rainbow, this one in marker with glitter glued around the edges. "Look, Daddy, I made it extra sparkly." He knelt down, pulling her close. "It's perfect, Princess, the most beautiful rainbow I've ever seen." "Can we hang it on the fridge with all the others?" "Absolutely." In the truck, Harper chattered about her day. Emma had shared cookies at lunch they'd learned about planets in science. Mrs. Patterson had read them a story about a brave mouse. Normal, beautiful, ordinary moments that Declan stored away like treasures because he knew bone deep how quickly normal could end. "Daddy, you're quiet today. Are you sad?" He glanced over, surprised by her perceptiveness. 6 years old and she could read him like a book. "Just tired, sweetheart. Work was busy." "Was it the sad queen?" His hands tightened on the wheel. "What?" "The lady you told me about. The one in the tall tower who lost her princess." Harper's expression held that serious intensity she got when working through big ideas. "Did you see her again?" Declan hadn't realized how much of his story Harper had internalized, how she'd taken his vague fairy tale about a lonely queen and connected it to real people. "What makes you think I saw her?" "Because you have your sad face, the one you get when you're thinking about people who are hurting." Smart, too smart for 6. "Yes, baby, I saw her, and yes, she's very sad." Harper considered this, swinging her legs that didn't quite reach the floor. "Someone should help her. Maybe she needs a rainbow too. Maybe she does." That night, after Harper fell asleep, Declan sat at the kitchen table with construction paper and markers. His artistic skills barely exceeded stick figures, but Harper's conviction about rainbows being bridges between sadness and hope had lodged in his mind, refusing to leave. He thought about the note he'd left on Victoria's counter, thought about crossing professional boundaries, thought about the fact that she was his boss and he was just the electrician, and getting involved in her personal pain was risky at best. Career-ending at worst. Then he thought about the birthday cake for a child who would never blow out another candle, and his hands moved before his brain could stop them. The rainbow came out, lopsided colors bleeding into each other, nothing like Harper's confident strokes. But at the bottom, in careful print, he wrote, "You are not alone. Even in tall towers, bridges can reach you. A friend." He stared at it for 10 minutes, arguing with himself. This was insane, inappropriate, potentially lawsuit-worthy if Victoria took offense, but something in him, the part that had held Grace's hand while she died, that understood grief's particular isolation, couldn't let it go. Friday morning, he arrived early, took the service elevator to 42 before anyone else showed up. Left the rainbow in a manila envelope outside Victoria's office door, unsigned except for the message. Then he fled like a coward, heart pounding, wondering if he'd just done something brave or catastrophically stupid. The weekend passed in Harper's comfortable chaos. They went to the park Saturday despite the cold-fed ducks that shouldn't have still been there in December, but apparently hadn't gotten the migration memo. Harper threw bread with wild enthusiasm, narrating conversations between the ducks that involved princesses and dragons and inevitably magic. Sunday brought grocery shopping, laundry, and an afternoon of Harper painting at the kitchen table while Declan caught up on invoices and bills. The mundane rhythm of single parenthood that somehow never felt mundane because every moment with her was a moment Grace didn't get. And he carried that awareness like a weight and a gift simultaneously. Monday morning, he arrived at work braced for consequences. Maybe Victoria had thrown the rainbow away without looking. Maybe she'd seen it and been offended. Maybe security would escort him out for harassment. Instead, at 9:47 a.m., his supervisor's phone rang. Frank covered the receiver, eyebrows raised. "Declan, Ms. Ashford's office is requesting you specifically for a repair, 42nd floor. They say it's urgent." His stomach dropped. "What kind of repair?" "Didn't specify, just said Ms. Ashford asked for you by name." Frank's expression held curiosity, but no suspicion. "Must have been impressed with your work last week." The elevator ride up felt like ascending to execution. The doors opened onto the executive floor, all glass walls and expensive carpet, and the hushed efficiency of people managing an empire. Marge looked up from her desk, surprise flickering across her features. "Mr. Wright, Ms. Ashford is expecting you. Go right in." The office door stood slightly ajar. Declan knocked anyway, every instinct screaming that this was a mistake. "Come in." Victoria's voice neutral and professional. He entered. The office matched the penthouse, minimalist, expensive, impersonal. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Dallas, the city spread out like a toy model 42 floors below. Victoria sat behind a glass desk with 3 monitors, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than Declan's truck. But on the corner of her desk, small and out of place among the technology and leather portfolios, sat his rainbow. She gestured to a chair. "Sit." He sat toolbox awkward in his lap, feeling like a student called to the principal's office. Victoria picked up the rainbow, studying it with an expression he couldn't read. For a long moment she didn't speak, just looked at the uneven colors, the crooked arch, the message written in his careful print. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its sharp edge. "There is no repair needed, Mr. Wright. I asked you here because I wanted to see if you'd actually come. If you were foolish enough or brave enough to face me after—" She stopped, swallowed. "After what you witnessed Thursday night. I apologize for intruding. I didn't mean to—" "You didn't intrude. I called you. Or rather, I had my building manager call you." She set the rainbow down carefully, precisely. "I wanted someone to see. I couldn't stand being invisible anymore, even in my own grief. Does that make sense?" It did, perfectly. "Yes. Your note, on the work order." Her fingers traced the edge of the rainbow. "And this, why?" Declan chose honesty because anything else felt disrespectful to what she'd shown him. "Because I know what it's like. To be drowning while everyone around you thinks you're fine. To mark birthdays for someone who isn't there. To feel like you're not allowed to fall apart because you're supposed to be strong." Victoria's breath hitched. "Your wife. 4 years ago, cancer. Harper was 2. He paused, then added, "Grace made me promise not to lock myself away, to open my heart when the time came. I failed at that promise mostly, but I understand what she meant. Grief isolates us. It makes us think we have to carry it alone. And your daughter made the rainbow." Victoria's voice had gone soft, almost wondering. "No, I did. Badly, as you can see. Harper makes them, constantly thinks they're bridges to heaven where her mother can visit. She wanted me to give you one because she said you looked sad, but I couldn't let a 6-year-old get involved in—" He gestured vaguely, encompassing the complicated mess of this situation. Victoria stood, walked to the window, gazed out at the city. Olivia believed the same thing about rainbows, that they connected sad people to happy ones. She'd draw them everywhere, walls, sidewalks, my work documents, when I brought them home. I used to get frustrated about the mess. Her laugh held no humor. "What I wouldn't give now for crayon marks on my quarterly reports." Declan waited. This felt important, fragile. One wrong word could shatter it. She was 4 years old. December 15th, 5 years ago, we were driving to her ballet recital. I checked my phone, just glanced at an email, 2 seconds, maybe 3. A truck ran a red light at 80 miles an hour. Victoria's voice stayed steady, clinical, like she was reporting facts that had happened to someone else. "Impact, driver's side rear. Olivia died on scene. I walked away with bruises. The police said even if I hadn't been distracted, I couldn't have avoided it. My ex-husband said otherwise. The divorce was final 6 months after we buried our daughter." The words landed in the space between them, heavy and irrevocable. Declan understood why she'd turned the photograph to the wall. Sometimes you had to hide the evidence of love because seeing it hurt too much to bear. "I'm sorry, that's inadequate, but I don't know what else to say." "There's nothing to say, nothing that helps anyway." Victoria turned from the window, and her mask had cracked enough that he could see the person underneath, exhausted, lonely, barely holding on. "I built this company into what it is because work doesn't require feelings. Numbers are clean. Profits are measurable. Success is quantifiable. But grief—" She shook her head. "Grief is chaos. It doesn't follow rules or respect schedules. It shows up at midnight with birthday cakes and refuses to leave. Does anyone know your family? My brother Jonathan, he tries to help, but he doesn't understand. He lost a niece. I lost my child. Those aren't the same." She returned to her desk, sat down with the careful movements of someone whose body ached from tension. "I haven't said her name out loud in 3 years, not to my therapist, not to anyone, just in my head, over and over, until it doesn't even sound like a word anymore." Declan thought about Grace, about the conscious effort to keep her present in Harper's life, to make sure their daughter knew her mother as more than fading photographs. "Harper asks about her mom constantly. At first it destroyed me, every question was a knife, but now I'm grateful. Grace exists in our conversations. She's still part of our family, just in a different way. I don't have that luxury. No one knew Olivia as mine. I worked too much, traveled too often. She was raising her hand in preschool graduation photos while I took calls in the back row. I thought I had time to balance it later when the company was more stable, when we'd hit our targets. I was wrong. The silence stretched, weighted with accumulated regrets. Outside the window, Dallas continued its indifferent business traffic. Flowing construction cranes, swinging lives progressing forward while two people sat in an expensive office, discussing the ways the world had ended and kept spinning anyway. Victoria picked up the rainbow again. Tell your daughter thank you for seeing what everyone else misses, for thinking a sad stranger deserves kindness. Actually, Declan hesitated, then decided commitment to honesty required full truth. Harper doesn't know I gave you this. She wants to meet you, to give you a rainbow herself. I keep putting her off because crossing boundaries between your life and mine feels inappropriate. But if you'd ever want to, Saturday. The word came out fast, like she'd decided before he finished speaking. Bring her Saturday afternoon, my penthouse. I'll order pizza. She can show me her rainbow theory properly. Ms. Ashford, you don't have to. Victoria, if we're going to acknowledge we both know what it's like to lose someone we love, you should use my name. And I'm not asking because I have to. I'm asking because I want to meet the little girl who thinks I deserve kindness. It's been a long time since anyone thought that. Declan saw the vulnerability in her eyes, the desperate hope that someone might reach through her isolation and prove that connection was still possible. He thought about Harper's innocent certainty that lonely people needed rainbows, about Grace's insistence that opening your heart was the only way to honor loss. Saturday afternoon, 2 o'clock. Perfect. He stood to leave, toolbox in hand, feeling like the ground beneath his feet had fundamentally shifted. At the door, Victoria's voice stopped him. Declan, the first time she'd used his name. Thank you for not pretending you didn't see, for not treating me like I'm broken, for understanding that sometimes we just need someone to witness the fact that we're still breathing, still trying, still here despite everything. He met her eyes across the office. You're not broken, Victoria. You're grieving. Those aren't the same thing. Her smile carried sorrow and gratitude in equal measure. I hope you're right. Telling Harper about Saturday required diplomacy. She'd been asking about the sad queen intermittently all week, and when Declan mentioned they'd been invited to visit, her excitement exploded into a flurry of questions, plans, and artistic preparation. Can I bring all my rainbows? What if she needs more than one? Should I make her a special one? What's her favorite color? Does she like glitter, Daddy? This is so important, we have to get it right. By Friday evening, Harper had created 7 new rainbows, each with elaborate designs and messages. You are loved. Sadness is temporary. Tomorrow will be better. And her personal favorite, rainbows never end, they just hide behind clouds. Declan helped her select the 3 best ones, packed them carefully in a folder, and tried not to think about how Saturday could go disastrously wrong in approximately 47 different ways. Saturday arrived cold and bright. Harper insisted on her purple dress, the fancy one usually reserved for holidays, and her sparkly shoes that lit up when she walked. She brushed her hair herself, producing crooked pigtails that Declan didn't have the heart to fix because she was so proud of them. Daddy, do I look nice? Will she like me? You look beautiful and she'll love you. Just be yourself, princess. Should I curtsy? Mrs. Patterson said queens deserve curtsies. Let's skip the curtsy. Just be polite and kind like you always are. The drive downtown took 20 minutes. Harper pressed her face to the window, watching the city transform from residential neighborhoods to downtown towers. When Ashford Technologies came into view, she gasped, Daddy, that's taller than the sky. The sad queen really does live in a tower. The parking garage felt different on a Saturday, empty and echoing none of the weekday chaos. Declan's boots echoed on concrete as he held Harper's hand. Riding the special elevator that required Victoria's keycard. Harper bounced on her toes, humming tunelessly, completely unaware of the complexity underlying this visit. The penthouse door opened before Declan could knock. Victoria stood there in jeans and a cream-colored sweater, hair down, instead of pulled back, looking younger and more uncertain than he'd ever seen her. For a moment, she just stared at Harper with an expression that made Declan's chest tighten. Harper blessedly had no filter. Hi, I'm Harper and I'm 6 years old and I brought you rainbows because Daddy said you're sad and rainbows help sad people feel better and I like your bracelet and are you really a queen? Victoria's laugh came out surprised and genuine. I'm not a queen, just a regular person, but thank you for the rainbows. I love them already. Would you like to come in? Harper walked in like she owned the place, looking around with wide eyes. Wow, everything is so white. It's like living inside a cloud. Do you have any toys? Can I see your room? Daddy says I can't be nosy, but I'm really curious. Harper let Victoria breathe. Declan grabbed his daughter's hand gently. Call me Victoria, please. She knelt down to Harper's height and Declan watched something shift in her face, a softness he hadn't seen before. I like curious. Curious is good. Want to help me decide what kind of pizza to order? Harper nodded enthusiastically. Pepperoni and cheese. And can we get breadsticks? Daddy says breadsticks are a special treat. They moved to the kitchen, the regular one, not the one where Declan had found Victoria crying. She pulled up a pizza menu on her phone while Harper climbed onto a bar stool, swinging her legs and chattering about her favorite foods, her friends at school, her teacher who read them stories about brave animals. Declan watched Victoria, listening with complete attention, asking questions, smiling at Harper's tangential storytelling. This wasn't the ruthless CEO. This was a woman starving for connection, for lightness, for the simple joy of a child's unfiltered enthusiasm. The pizza arrived 40 minutes later. They ate at Victoria's pristine dining table, Harper, leaving crumbs and grease stains that Victoria didn't seem to notice. The conversation flowed easily, Harper asking questions only a 6-year-old would think to ask. Why don't you have pictures on your walls? Daddy has pictures of Mommy Grace everywhere. He says it's important to remember people we love. Victoria's smile faltered. I used to have pictures, but sometimes remembering hurts too much. That's silly. Remembering is the best part. I remember when Mommy Grace made me pancakes shaped like bunnies. I remember when she sang me songs before bed. I remember everything and it makes me happy even though I'm sad too. Harper paused, considering. You can be both. Happy and sad at the same time. Mrs. Patterson told us that. Declan started to redirect, but Victoria held up a hand. Your teacher is very wise, and you're right, you can be both. I think I forgot that somewhere along the way. After pizza, Harper pulled out her rainbow collection. She spread them across Victoria's coffee table, explaining each one with the seriousness of a museum curator presenting priceless art. This one has extra glitter because glitter is happy. This one has a sun behind the rainbow because sun comes after rain. And this one, she held up her masterpiece, this one is special. See, two people holding hands under the rainbow. That's you and me, because friends help each other not be sad. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She blinked rapidly, trying to maintain composure, but Harper noticed immediately. It's okay to cry. Daddy cries sometimes. Crying means you have a big heart with lots of feelings. You're very smart, Harper. Your daddy is raising you well. Victoria looked at Declan over Harper's head, and her expression held gratitude and something else, something tentative that looked almost like hope. Harper climbed into Victoria's lap without asking permission, wrapping small arms around her neck. You don't have to be sad alone anymore. You have me now, and Daddy. We're good at helping people. Victoria held Harper carefully, like she was made of glass, like she might disappear if the embrace wasn't gentle enough. Tears spilled down her face and she didn't try to hide them. Declan watched this woman who terrified executives and dominated boardrooms, completely undone by a 6-year-old's uncomplicated affection. When Harper finally pulled back, she patted Victoria's cheek. There, feel better. Much better. Thank you, Harper. The afternoon dissolved into unexpected ease. Victoria showed Harper the view from the windows, the city spread out 42 floors below, tiny cars and people living their lives. Harper pressed her nose to the glass, narrating stories about where everyone was going, what adventures they were having. Later, she discovered Victoria's extensive book collection, the one human touch in the sterile apartment, and insisted Victoria read to her. They settled on the couch, Harper tucked against Victoria's side while Victoria read about a mouse seeking cheese and finding friendship. Declan watched from the kitchen, ostensibly cleaning up pizza boxes but really just observing this impossible scene. Victoria's voice reading children's stories. Harper's rapt attention, the way Victoria's hand unconsciously stroked Harper's hair. All of it felt surreal and right simultaneously. When Harper started yawning around 5 o'clock, Declan knew it was time to leave. Harper protested naturally, but Victoria promised they could do this again. Really? You promise? Can we come back next Saturday? Victoria looked at Declan, asking permission without words. He nodded. Next Saturday, same time, but maybe we try a different pizza topping. Hawaiian with pineapple. Some people say pineapple doesn't belong on pizza, but they're wrong. At the door, Harper hugged Victoria one more time. Thank you for being my friend. I'm sorry you're sad about your little girl. I bet she was really nice. Victoria's composure cracked completely. She knelt down eye level with Harper. She was the best thing that ever happened to me, just like you're the best thing that ever happened to your daddy. Will you tell me about her sometime, about your Olivia? The name spoken so casually by a child who didn't know the weight it carried made Victoria flinch. But then she smiled through tears. Yes, sometime I'll tell you all about her. In the elevator, Harper chattered about the afternoon while Declan processed what had just happened. Victoria had said her daughter's name, out loud, to Harper, had held a child without falling apart, had laughed and read stories and allowed herself a few hours of something almost like normal. Daddy, Victoria is really nice. Can we help her not be sad anymore? We can try, Princess. Sometimes the best help is just being there. Just showing up and reminding people they're not alone. Like rainbows. Exactly like rainbows. That night after Harper fell asleep clutching a new stuffed animal, Victoria had insisted she take a small purple elephant that had been Olivia's, though. Victoria didn't say that part out loud. Declan received a text from an unknown number. Thank you for today, for Harper, for reminding me what it feels like to have someone look at me and not see a CEO or a tragedy, just a person worth knowing. She's remarkable. You're doing everything right. Victoria. He stared at the message for a long time before responding. She thinks you're remarkable too. We'll see you next Saturday. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I look forward to it more than I can express. The following week established a pattern neither of them had planned, but both needed. Tuesday morning, Victoria requested Declan specifically to check some wiring in her office. There was nothing wrong with the wiring. They talked for 20 minutes about Harper's school project, about Victoria's brother, Jonathan, who kept trying to set her up on blind dates about the weather and work and carefully avoiding anything too personal. Thursday, she asked him to look at a flickering light in the conference room. Again, nothing needed fixing. This time they talked about Grace, how she'd loved terrible jokes, how she'd burned every dinner but somehow made incredible desserts, how she'd insisted on dancing in the living room even when there was no music. Saturday came again. Pizza Hawaiian this time because Harper had decreed it, and hours of Harper entertaining Victoria with 6-year-old logic and endless questions. Victoria showed them Olivia's room, preserved exactly as it had been 5 years ago, and cried while telling stories about a little girl who'd loved tutus and refused to eat vegetables and drew rainbows on everything. Harper listened with the serious attention she gave important matters, then declared, "She sounds perfect. I bet I would have liked her." "She would have loved you. She always wanted a big sister." Victoria's voice broke on the last word. "Well, now she has me. I can be her big sister from Earth while she's in heaven. We'll share you." The simplicity of it, the way Harper could take complicated grief and make it manageable through pure, uncomplicated love, left both adults speechless. These Saturdays became sacred. Victoria started working fewer hours, leaving the office at 6 instead of 9, taking Sundays completely off. The change didn't go unnoticed. Marge commented that Ms. Ashford seemed almost human, which was apparently high praise. Jonathan cornered Declan one afternoon in early January. He'd figured out that the electrician his sister kept requesting was the same man bringing his daughter to weekend visits. "I don't know what you're doing, right, but whatever it is, keep doing it. I haven't seen Victoria this alive in 5 years." He paused, then added, "Just don't hurt her, she's been through enough." "That's not my intention." "Good, because if you break her heart, I know people who know people, and you have a daughter to think about." The threat was delivered with a smile, but Declan recognized the steel underneath. "Understood." But Jonathan's warning raised a question Declan had been avoiding. What were they doing? Victoria was his boss. She was worth millions. She lived in a different world operated by different rules. And yet here they were, spending Saturdays like a makeshift family, sharing grief and pizza and the slow work of healing. He didn't have an answer. Wasn't sure he wanted one. Some things defied categorization, existed in spaces between defined relationships, and maybe that was okay. Until it wasn't. The whispers started in February. Marge Collins noticed first the way Ms. Ashford smiled when Mr. Wright's name appeared on the work order schedule, how she'd find reasons to request him specifically even when other technicians were available. By Valentine's Day, 3 admin assistants had placed bets on whether something was happening between the CEO and the electrician. Declan remained oblivious until Trevor Blackwood made it impossible to ignore. Trevor served as COO, 48 years old, with silver hair and expensive suits that couldn't hide the predatory calculation in his eyes. He'd expected the CEO position when Victoria's father died, had instead watched a 28-year-old woman claim it and transform the company beyond his comprehension. The resentment had festered for 3 years, waiting for opportunity. He found it on a Tuesday morning in late February. Declan was replacing circuit breakers on floor 38 when Trevor appeared, ostensibly inspecting facilities but clearly hunting for something specific. His smile held no warmth. "Right, isn't it, the maintenance man Ms. Ashford seems so fond of?" "Just doing my job, sir." "Of course, though your job seems to involve an unusual amount of time in the executive suite. Tell me, does she request you by name often?" The question carried implications that made Declan's jaw tighten. "When there's electrical work needed, yes. I'm the senior technician." "Interesting. And these Saturday visits I've heard about, those also part of your job description?" Declan straightened, meeting Trevor's eyes directly. "My personal time is my own business. Not when it involves the CEO of this company. Not when it creates the appearance of impropriety." Trevor leaned against the wall, casual but calculated. "People are talking right, wondering if perhaps your continued employment, your preferential treatment, stems from something other than your electrical expertise. You understand how that looks. Nothing inappropriate is happening. But something is happening. A man in your position alone with a child befriending a wealthy widow, some might call that opportunistic, especially when that widow controls your paycheck." Trevor pushed off the wall, straightening his tie. "Just friendly advice. Protect your reputation. Protect hers, before this situation becomes complicated." He walked away, leaving Declan with rage burning in his chest and fear coiling in his gut. Because Trevor was right about one thing, people were talking and perception mattered even when reality was innocent. That evening, Declan called Victoria instead of texting. She answered on the second ring, and he could hear exhaustion in her voice. "Is everything okay, Harper?" "Harper's fine, but we need to talk, not at the office." Silence stretched between them, waited with understanding. "My place. After Harper's asleep. I'll text you the door code." He arrived at the penthouse at 9:30, hands shaking slightly as he rode the elevator up. Victoria met him at the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, hair down, looking nothing like the CEO who intimidated boardrooms. She looked like someone who'd been crying recently and was trying to hide it. "Trevor confronted me today. Made some implications about us, about my motives." Declan followed her to the living room, sat on the edge of the couch. "He's right that people are talking. About you requesting me for work, about Saturdays." Victoria poured 2 glasses of wine without asking if he wanted any, handed him one. Jonathan warned me this might happen. He said Trevor's been looking for ammunition, anything to undermine me with the board. Then we should stop. The Saturdays, the requests. Whatever this is, it's not worth your career. What is this, Declan? She sat across from him, curled into the chair like she was trying to make herself smaller. Because I honestly don't know anymore. You're not just the electrician who fixed my sink. Harper's not just a child who brings me rainbows, but I don't have a word for what you are. He didn't either. Friends felt insufficient, but anything more felt impossible, not because he didn't feel it, but because the complications were insurmountable. I know you've been hurt. I know trusting anyone after what you've been through is terrifying, and I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. But I also can't pretend this is nothing. I'm scared. The admission came out small, vulnerable. Not of Trevor or gossip or what people think. I'm scared that if I let myself care about you, really care the way I'm starting to, I'll lose you too. Everyone I love disappears, my daughter, my marriage, my father. I can't survive losing anyone else. Declan set down his wine, moved to kneel in front of her chair. Victoria, you can't live your life avoiding connection because you're afraid of loss. That's not living. That's just existing in a prettier coffin. Easy to say when you've had 4 years to process your grief. I'm still drowning. You think I'm not scared, I'm terrified. He took her hand, felt her fingers trembling. I promised Grace I'd open my heart again, but I didn't think it would be to someone like you. Someone so brilliant and successful that the gap between our worlds feels impossible to cross. Someone like me. Her voice sharpened with hurt. Someone who could have anyone. Someone who shouldn't want an electrician with barely a high school education and a 6-year-old daughter and a truck that breaks down every other month. You think I care about education or money or any of that? Victoria pulled her hand away, stood up, paced to the window. You're the first person in 5 years who's looked at me and seen a human being instead of a CEO or a tragic figure. You and Harper have given me something I thought I'd lost forever, the ability to feel joy without guilt, to laugh without apologizing, to say my daughter's name out loud without breaking. Then what are we afraid of? She turned from the window and her face showed all the warring emotions she usually kept hidden. Everything. We're afraid of everything, and maybe that means we're not ready for whatever this could be. The words hit like a punch. Declan stood, picked up his jacket. Maybe you're right. Maybe we should stop while we can still walk away without damage. Declan, wait. I'll tell Harper we can't visit anymore. She'll be upset, but she'll understand eventually. He moved toward the door, throat tight with disappointment and the bitter recognition that sometimes caring about someone meant letting them go. What about what I want? Victoria's voice stopped him halfway across the room. What if I don't want you to walk away? Then tell me what you do want, because I can't keep existing in this undefined space waiting for you to decide if I'm worth the risk. I want... She pressed her hands to her face, breathing hard. I want to not be terrified every second that happiness is temporary. I want to believe that opening my heart won't destroy me again. I want you and Harper in my life, but I don't know how to do this without falling apart. Declan crossed back to her, gently pulled her hands away from her face. Then fall apart. Stop trying to control everything. Let yourself be messy and uncertain and afraid, because that's what real life looks like. Not the polished version you show the world, but the complicated, terrifying, beautiful reality underneath. She looked up at him, tears streaming freely now. I don't know how. Start by admitting this is more than friendship, that you feel something for me even if it scares you. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away tears. Start by being honest instead of safe. I'm falling in love with you and it terrifies me. The words came out in a rush like she'd been holding them back too long. I'm falling in love with Harper. I'm falling in love with the life you represent, messy and real and everything mine hasn't been since Olivia died. And I'm terrified that admitting it will make it disappear. Saying it out loud doesn't make it disappear. It makes it real. He leaned his forehead against hers, breathing in her fear and vulnerability, and the tentative hope underneath. I'm falling in love with you too, with the person you are when you're not being perfect, with the woman who reads to my daughter and cries over birthday cakes and is brave enough to keep breathing despite everything you've lost. When he kissed her, it felt like crossing a line they couldn't uncross. Her lips tasted like wine and salt and uncertainty. She kissed him back with desperation and need, hands fisting in his shirt like she was afraid he'd vanish if she let go. They broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads still pressed together. This complicates everything. I know. Trevor will use it against me. The board might question my judgment. We'll have to be careful, strategic. Or we could just be honest, tell people the truth that we're two adults who found each other in grief and are trying to build something good from the wreckage. Declan stepped back, giving her space. But that requires you being willing to fight for this. For us. And I won't push you into anything you're not ready for. Victoria wrapped her arms around herself and he watched her war between fear and want. I need time to figure out how to navigate this without it exploding in our faces. Can you give me that? How much time? I don't know. A few weeks, a month? She looked miserable, asking, I'm not pushing you away. I'm just trying to protect what we have before Trevor or anyone else destroys it. Declan wanted to argue that hiding would only make them look guilty, that secrets gave power to rumors. But he also saw the genuine terror in her eyes, the bone-deep fear that letting herself be happy would invoke some cosmic punishment. Okay, we'll be careful. We'll keep Saturdays private. I won't request unnecessary work orders to see you. Thank you for understanding. I understand you're scared, but Victoria... He caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. At some point you have to decide if the fear is worth missing out on something real. Because I can't live in limbo forever. Harper deserves stability, and so do you. After he left, Victoria stood at the window, watching Dallas lights blur through tears, wondering how she'd reached 31 years old. Without learning that love required courage, and courage was the one thing grief had stolen from her. March brought unseasonably warm weather and escalating tension. Trevor had noticed Victoria's shift in demeanor, the way she seemed lighter despite attempting to hide it. He began collecting evidence photographs of Declan's truck in the executive parking garage on Saturdays. Notes about how often Victoria requested him for minor repairs, testimony from employees who'd seen them talking. He presented his case to the board at their quarterly meeting, framing it as concern about CEO judgment and potential liability. Ms. Ashford is engaging in an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate employee. While I have no proof of explicit misconduct, the appearance only damages this company's reputation and exposes us to potential lawsuits. Jonathan Ashford. Victoria's brother and board member immediately pushed back. You have photos of a truck in a parking lot and some conversations. That's not evidence of anything except your desperate attempt to undermine my sister. I have a pattern of preferential treatment and unexplained personal meetings. At minimum, the board should require disclosure of any relationship and establish clear policies about fraternization. The vote was close, but ultimately the board agreed Victoria would need to either formally disclose any relationship with an employee or ensure all interactions were strictly professional and documented. Victoria left that meeting shaking with rage and fear. She called Declan from her car, voice tight. Trevor's forcing my hand. The board wants disclosure or separation, complete professional distance. So disclose it. Tell them the truth. You don't understand what that means, the scrutiny, the gossip, the way people will question every decision I make. They'll say I'm distracted, emotional, no longer fit to lead. Her breath came in short gasps. I've worked 10 years building this company. I can't let a relationship, no matter how much I care about you, destroy everything. The words landed like stones. Declan pulled his truck to the side of the road, unable to drive while processing what she was saying. So what are you telling me, that your career is more important than us? I'm telling you I don't know how to choose, and I'm furious that I'm being forced to. She was crying now, he could hear it. Why does loving you have to mean sacrificing everything else? Why can't I have both? Because we live in the real world where CEOs and electricians don't get fairy tale endings without consequences. He hated the bitterness in his own voice. I knew this was impossible from the start. I just let myself hope anyway. Declan, please. I need to think about what's best for Harper for me. I can't keep waiting while you decide if we're worth the cost. He ended the call before she could respond, before his resolve could crumble. That night, Harper asked why Victoria hadn't visited in 3 weeks. Did we make her sad? Did I do something wrong? No, baby, Victoria's just very busy with work right now. But she promised we were friends. Friends don't disappear. Harper's lower lip trembled. First Mommy Grace, now Victoria. Everyone leaves. The accusation gutted him. He pulled Harper close, feeling like he'd failed her and Victoria and Grace's memory all at once. Sometimes adults make things complicated when they should be simple. Victoria isn't leaving because of you. She loves you very much. Then why isn't she here? He had no good answer. Friday afternoon, Victoria showed up at his apartment unannounced. Harper was at a playdate and Declan answered the door to find her standing there in jeans and a coat hair, wind-blown eyes red. I talked to Jonathan, talked to my lawyer, talked to everyone except the person who matters most. She didn't wait for invitation pushed past him into the small living room. I'm transferring your employment contract to an outside maintenance company. You'll be an independent contractor doing work for Ashford Technologies, but you won't technically be my employee anymore. It won't satisfy Trevor completely, but it removes the direct superior-subordinate issue. Victoria, I'm not finished. I'm also cutting my work hours, delegating more, hiring a COO who can actually do the job instead of scheming to take mine. She paced his small space like a caged animal, finally finding the door open. And I'm done hiding. If people want to gossip about who I love, let them. I've spent 5 years caring too much what everyone thinks, trying to be perfect, trying to prove I deserve to breathe after my daughter couldn't. I'm exhausted, Declan. I'm so tired of being afraid. He caught her mid-pace hands on her shoulders. What are you saying? I'm saying you're right. Fear isn't worth missing out on something real. I love you. I love Harper. I want us, even if it's messy and complicated and everyone in Dallas has an opinion about it. She grabbed his shirt, pulled him closer. But I need you to be patient while I learn how to do this, how to be someone's partner instead of being alone, how to let someone see my worst moments without assuming they'll leave. I can be patient, but Victoria, I need you to fight for this too. Not just say pretty words, but actually show up. For me, for Harper, even when it's hard. I will. I am. She kissed him with more confidence than before, less desperation and more determination. Starting now. When Harper came home an hour later, Victoria was still there helping Declan make dinner in his cramped kitchen. Harper's shriek of joy could probably be heard in the next county. Victoria, you came back. I knew you wouldn't leave forever. I'm sorry I stayed away. I was scared and confused, but that's not an excuse. I should have explained instead of disappearing. Victoria knelt down eye level with Harper. Can you forgive me? Harper threw her arms around Victoria's neck. You're here now. That's what matters. Over spaghetti that evening, with Harper chattering about her playdate and Victoria laughing at a sauce stain on her expensive jeans, Declan felt something shift. This wasn't perfect. Victoria still flinched when her phone buzzed with work emergencies. He still worried about providing for Harper while dating a millionaire, but they were trying, and trying mattered more than perfection. After Harper went to bed, Victoria curled against Declan on the couch. Tell me about Grace, the hard parts, not just the pretty memories. Why? Because if I'm going to let myself love you, I need to understand all of you, including the parts that still belong to her. So he told her about Grace's final months when the pain got so bad she couldn't hide it anymore, about having to explain to a 2-year-old that Mommy was sick and might not get better, about the guilt of feeling relieved when she finally died because at least the suffering had ended, about the nights he'd contemplated giving up, letting Maggie take Harper because he didn't think he could survive being the only parent. But you did survive. You're an incredible father. I'm a father who's barely keeping his head above water most days, who feeds his kids cereal for dinner more than he should, who can't remember when school picture day is. And now I'm bringing her into another complicated situation where she could get hurt if this doesn't work out. Victoria took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. Declan Wright, you are not failing your daughter. You're showing her what love looks like after loss, what resilience looks like, what courage looks like when you open your heart despite every reason not to. That's worth more than perfect dinners or remembered picture days. Even if we screw this up, even if trying and failing hurts her, even then, because the alternative is teaching her that fear should win, that protecting yourself matters more than taking chances on people who might be worth it. Victoria's smile held sadness and hope equally. Harper's already lost her mother. Don't let your fear make her lose the possibility of more people to love. The truth of it settled in his chest, heavy and liberating simultaneously. I'm terrified of losing you. Good. I'm terrified of losing you too. That means we care enough to fight through whatever comes next. They sat in the quiet of his apartment, so different from her sterile penthouse surrounded by Harper's artwork and evidence of life being lived imperfectly. Victoria traced patterns on his arm, content in a way he'd never seen her. Move in with me. The words came out impulsive, unplanned. She sat up, startled. What? Not tomorrow, not next week, but eventually. Move in with me or let Harper and me move into the penthouse. I don't care which. I just want to wake up with you there. Want Harper to have stability instead of this back and forth uncertainty. Declan, we've only been together a few months. People will say things regardless, but if we're doing this, if we're really committing to building something, then let's build it. All in, not halfway. Victoria stood, paced to the window, stared out at the modest neighborhood so far removed from her usual world. My penthouse is 42 floors up. Harper would be isolated from other children. Your apartment is small, but there's a park nearby, kids her age, maybe. She turned back, expression uncertain but determined. Maybe I move here. Sell the penthouse, buy a house in this neighborhood, something with a yard where Harper can play, where I can have a garden and neighbors who don't recognize me from Forbes. You'd give up the penthouse? It's never been home, just an expensive monument to loneliness. She came back to the couch, straddled his lap hands on his shoulders. I want a home. With you, with Harper, with space for Olivia's memory and Grace's memory and whatever we build together. Is that insane? Completely. He pulled her close, breathing in the reality of her. Let's do it anyway. By April, Victoria had listed the penthouse and was house hunting in Oak Cliff. The media noticed Forbes ran a piece titled Billionaire CEO Downsizes, What Does It Mean for Ashford Tech? But Victoria ignored the speculation, focused instead on finding a 4-bedroom house with a yard and good schools nearby. She found it in early May, a craftsman-style home 3 blocks from Declan's apartment, built in the 1920s with original hardwood floors and a wraparound porch. It needed work, had outdated plumbing and questionable electrical. But it had character and space and a massive oak tree in the backyard, perfect for a swing. It's nothing like your penthouse. Declan stood in the empty living room, imagining furniture and life filling these spaces. Exactly. The penthouse was where I went to hide from life. This is where I want to live it. Victoria spun in a circle, arms out. Harper can have the room with the window seat. We'll paint it whatever color she wants. And the 4th bedroom, her voice caught. We'll make it Olivia's memorial room, somewhere I can keep her things, talk to her without feeling like I'm frozen in the past. Declan pulled her close. You're sure about this, leaving your old life behind? That life almost killed me. I want this one instead. They closed on the house in June. Harper helped choose paint colors, yellow for her room, soft blue for the memorial space that would honor Olivia. Victoria hired Declan to handle all the electrical upgrades, paying him fairly despite his protests. I'm not giving you charity. You're the best electrician I know, and I want this house done right. She kissed him in the gutted kitchen, covered in drywall dust and completely content. Besides, this way I get to watch you work. Do you know how attractive you are when you're being competent with tools? That's sexual harassment, Ms. Ashford. Sue me, Mr. Wright. The house renovation took 3 months. They worked mostly on weekends, Harper helping by painting baseboards with more enthusiasm than precision. Maggie brought lunch, stayed to help strip wallpaper, and cried happy tears when Victoria asked if she'd continue being their neighbor, their family, the grandmother Harper deserved. Jonathan visited one Saturday, watched his sister covered in paint and laughing while Harper told elaborate stories about the family of squirrels living in their oak tree. He pulled Declan aside while Victoria was distracted. "I was wrong about you. Thought you might be using her, might hurt her. But you're saving her, giving her back the life she'd forgotten how to want." Jonathan's handshake carried genuine respect. "Welcome to the family for whatever that's worth." "It's worth a lot." Trevor Blackwood was less gracious. When Victoria announced her new housing situation to the board, framing it as a lifestyle change rather than acknowledging the relationship that everyone knew existed, he made one final attempt at sabotage. "Ms. Ashford is making personal decisions that reflect poor judgment. Moving into a working-class neighborhood, dating an employee, bringing a child into an unstable situation, none of this suggests someone fit to lead a technology company." Victoria stood at the head of the conference table, composed and certain. "Mr. Blackwood, my personal life is my own. My professional performance speaks for itself. Revenue up 32% year over year. Client retention at 96%, employee satisfaction at record highs since I've been delegating more and modeling work-life balance. If you'd like to challenge my leadership, call for a formal vote. But I suspect you won't like the outcome." The board voted 8-2 in her favor. Trevor resigned the following day, taking a position with a competitor and leaving Victoria free to lead without constant sabotage. "Did you know he'd resign if you stood up to him?" Declan asked that night, celebrating with champagne in their half-renovated kitchen. "I hoped, but I was prepared to fight him either way. You and Harper are worth fighting for." Harper wandered in wearing paint-splattered overalls, holding a drawing. "Victoria, I made you something." It was a rainbow as always, but this one had 4 figures underneath, too tall, too small. "That's you and Daddy and me and Olivia. We're all together now." Victoria picked Harper up despite the child being too big for it, holding her tight. "Thank you, sweetheart. It's perfect. Are you going to marry my daddy?" The question came out casual, but Harper's eyes held real concern. Victoria glanced at Declan over Harper's head. They hadn't discussed marriage, had been taking things one step at a time. "Would you like that?" "Yes. Then you'd really be my family, not just my friend." Harper paused, then added with 6-year-old wisdom, "And then you wouldn't be sad anymore, because family fixes sad." "You're absolutely right." Victoria set Harper down, kissed her forehead. "Family does fix sad. Thank you for being mine." That night, after Harper was asleep in her new yellow room, Victoria and Declan sat on the porch swing they'd hung that afternoon. The neighborhood was quiet except for crickets and distant traffic. Stars competed with Dallas light pollution, mostly losing. She asked if we're getting married. Victoria's head rested on his shoulder. "I heard. What do you think?" "I think I never expected to want marriage again. After Olivia died, after my first marriage imploded under the weight of blame and grief, I thought that door was closed." She sat up, turned to face him. "But Harper's right. You're my family now, you and her. And if marriage makes that official, makes Harper feel secure, then yes. I want that." Declan hadn't planned this moment, hadn't bought a ring or prepared a speech. But sitting on their porch swing in this house they were building together, everything felt perfectly right despite its imperfection. "Grace told me once that hearts are bigger than we think, that they can hold more than one love. I didn't understand what she meant until I met you." He took Victoria's hands, held them between his own calloused palms. "You don't replace her. Harper doesn't replace Olivia, but we make something new together. Something that honors who we lost by choosing to keep living, keep loving, keep trying." "Is that a yes?" Victoria's smile was watery. That's a yes, if you're asking. Victoria Ashford doesn't ask, she declares. But her voice shook with emotion. Declan Wright, I want to marry you. I want to be Harper's mother, not replacing Grace but adding to her love. I want to build this life together, messy and imperfect and real. Will you let me? On one condition. He wiped tears from her cheeks. You stop trying to be perfect. Stop trying to earn the right to be happy. Just be you, the woman who cries at birthday cakes and reads stories to my daughter and is brave enough to love again despite everything you've lost. I can do that. I'm learning how. She kissed him soft and certain. We'll learn together. They sat on the porch until midnight, planning a wedding that would be small and intimate, held in their backyard under the oak tree. Harper would be flower girl naturally. Maggie would cry and Jonathan would give Victoria away, and they'd serve pizza because that's what had brought them together in the first place. Think people will talk CEO marrying the electrician. Declan traced patterns on her hand. Absolutely, let them. We'll be too busy living our lives to care. The house still needed work. The electrical wasn't finished, the bathroom needed retailing. The garden was overgrown. But it was theirs, imperfect and full of possibility, like everything worth having. Inside, Harper slept in yellow walls surrounded by rainbow paintings. Olivia's room waited upstairs, ready to become a memorial instead of a shrine. Grace's photograph sat on the mantel, welcomed instead of forgotten. And two people who'd almost let fear win sat together on a porch swing, choosing love, despite knowing exactly how much it could hurt. Because that's what courage looked like, not the absence of fear, but loving anyway. Trying anyway. Building something beautiful from broken pieces and believing it could last. Even when believing felt impossible. Especially then. 3 months later, on a September afternoon, when the Texas heat had finally broken and the sky was impossibly blue, they stood under the oak tree in their backyard and promised forever. Harper stood beside Victoria in a purple dress, holding a bouquet of flowers. She'd picked herself. Maggie cried happy tears in the front row. Jonathan gave his sister away with a smile that said he'd never seen her this happy. And when the officiant asked if they took each other for better or worse, in sickness and health, through grief and joy, and all the messy complications of building a life together, they answered without hesitation. I do. Because some promises were worth making even when you'd learned how easily they could break. Because love wasn't about guarantees or safety or protecting yourself from pain. It was about showing up anyway, trying anyway, choosing each other every day despite knowing the risks. Harper threw rose petals with wild enthusiasm, getting more on herself than the ground. Victoria laughed, really laughed, uninhibited and free, and Declan thought about how far they'd come from that night in the penthouse kitchen when he'd found her broken on the floor. They'd built something real from that wreckage, a family stitched together from loss and hope and the stubborn refusal to let fear win. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was theirs, and that made it beautiful anyway.